You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood. The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. This podcast is brought to you by Parents You've Got This and proudly supported by Mistela. Mistela is a natural origin skincare for babies and children, recommended by healthcare professionals. Mistela by Parents' Side since 1950.
As a new parent, parenting guilt can be a big thing that we all struggle with, as we can't be in 100 places doing 100 things all at the same time, and this can lead to guilt. Today on the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast, we're going to be talking about how to get some relief from this parenting guilt.
We are joined by psychologist Dr. Carrie Hayward, who has her own private practice, A Place to Be, in Melbourne. She is the author of the Being Human book series, and she has 3 children of her own, and she knows exactly what it feels like to be split in more directions and wishes that she has more arms than she currently has. Thank you so much, Carrie, for being with us today.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.
Now, let's talk about parenting guilt. So, what is it? Can you tell us, for you and with your personal and your professional experience, what is parenting guilt all about?
I think it's the very uncomfortable feeling that we all know too well, that comes up when we feel like we are either not doing things as best as we can, we're not being in all the different places that we feel like we need to be, but also it can be an internal kind of struggle as well. Am I experiencing, feeling, thinking the way that I should be feeling?
That's so true.
What are some of the common triggers that parents will have when it comes to parenting guilt?
I think it somewhat can depend on the sort of the stages. I think in the early days, as I said, it can often be this expectation around what I should be feeling, what I should be thinking about this. Should I be enjoying it? Should I be, feeling more positive about it? Should I be bonding with my baby more than I am? And so, again, there's a lot of expectations we put on ourselves. And it's just being really careful that whatever it is that we are experiencing is our human experience, and also so very related to what might be happening at that point in time as well, and being careful of the shoulds around that. And then it just depends on, as I said, the stage. So another commonplace time that guilt can come up is when we return to work for parents that do. So again, it's that leaving of or separating from baby. Another one can be if we're putting the baby or the child in care, whether that be actual sort of a daycare arrangement, or whether that be even with a nanny, a babysitter, or even with family. So it can come up in all different places. And I think one of the most important understandings about guilt is we so easily misinterpret guilt. When guilt comes up, we immediately think that it means we're doing something wrong, because that's how we're sort of instinctively wired to experience this feeling. So it comes up and our initial reaction is, what am I doing wrong? Or I'm doing something wrong. When guilt is actually, the core essence of guilt is actually about what we care about.
Oh, that's so really interesting. Beautiful. I never knew that.
So we only hurt where we care. And if we're doing something that is difficult, because I do have to leave my baby for a certain amount of time, or I am feeling a certain way, it's only difficult because we care. So one of the most helpful things we can do is actually reinterpret and reframe that guilt and tell ourselves that we're feeling this because of how deeply we love and care.
And as new parents, it's really normal to make mistakes, and we can really beat ourselves up about these. Can you talk to us a little bit about the regret and guilt we feel and when it's destructive, and also then maybe how we can reframe it and when not to dwell on it so much?
Yeah, it's a really important question, because as you say, it's going to happen. We're going to say things, we're going to do things, we're reactive human beings, and so any self-awareness, consciousness, mindfulness in the world is not going to fully prevent that. It's very similar, to respond to that in a more healthy way, it's very similar in thinking about the guilt and what it's telling us, in that if I've said something, done something reactively, and I then feel really uncomfortable about that, the discomfort tells me I'm not that. So there's actually a lot of goodness and a lot that tells us in that discomfort. That
Thank goodness.
And
I love that.
Yeah. So we want to be able to sort of make room for that and just allow us to come back to that in normalising and accepting our reactiveness as a human being. And then, as I said, if we feel icky or uncomfortable about that, it tells us we're actually not that behaviour.
Yes.
It's actually the difference between, what I'm kind of talking about is the difference between guilt and shame. So where we go wrong is when we shame ourselves for making a mistake. And the difference is guilt is when we can feel uncomfortable about something we've done that we later go, I could have said that or done that differently. As I said, that's not a bad thing. So we're kind of sort of judging the behaviour, if that makes sense, or at least looking at the behaviour as something we could do differently. It's when we judge ourselves. That's what shame is. That's the difference. Guilt's judging the behaviour, shame's judging ourselves for the behaviour. And so we want to be able to reflect on the behaviour and go, okay, this further tells me about the person I want to be, about what I might do differently to reconnect and realign with who I want to be. Whereas shame is we're kind of judging ourselves for being a human being. And as I said, that's where it becomes very unhealthy and destructive. So we want to do the opposite and go, okay, I'm a human being that is reactive. I'm going to say and do things that I later go, shouldn't have said that, or maybe whatever. And as I said, that can be actually a really healthy thing to do. And this time I'll do this. Next time I'll do different, okay? So that acceptance piece and reminding ourselves that, okay, I can come back to who I want to be. That just tells me, this feeling tells me that. There's so much in that, yeah.
Oh, that's so good. And when it comes to being a parent, we often think we should be perfect, and we often have a lot of perfectionism in parenting, which is so silly. I don't know where the notion came about that we all need to be perfect parents. No one's perfect at anything. What's your advice around trying to be less perfect of a parent?
Well, you're absolutely right, and perfectionism doesn't exist as much as many of us would like to think it does. I'll believe it does. And that's because, when I talk about perfectionism, I always bring it back to our values. And as I say, our values are around the person we want to be, how we want to show up, the qualities we want to stand by and live by. And why perfectionism therefore doesn't exist is because there's so many different ways to live a value, okay? Not only that, but to do something always perfectly and never, as I said, react or get it wrong or make a mistake, we would actually need to sort of program those values in and become robotic. We can't always be expecting ourselves to be conscious of that, of what we're saying and what we're doing. It's kind of the after that sometimes we go, okay, this is where I might do differently. So it's letting go, I guess, of control of that, because a lot of the time where we might feel like we need to do something differently or we haven't done something good enough or whatever it might be, we haven't again had full control over that. So this idea that we can fully control what we're doing but also fully control how that eventuates, it just doesn't exist. So it's letting go of a lot of control with perfectionism. And the way we can do that in a really secure way is to come back to our values. And just when I talk about values, I talk about, generally speaking, there's two words I always put in front of values, in that, okay, if I want to be a present mother, if I want to be kind, if I want to be patient, whatever it might be, generally speaking, am I living that? And it just allows for this imperfection. It allows for things that we can't always do or get right. Yeah.
Does the same principle apply to when we're making big decisions as parents? So whether it's around, something like our baby's sleep space or the way we feed our baby or the decision to go back to work and what sort of care we're looking for, all these decisions that we make along the way, we can have different feelings about that are uncomfortable. Does the same sort of principle then apply in terms of, looking at it, like you say, with two lenses, I guess, is it?
Yeah, and I think, absolutely, and I think what you're referring to there is also expecting ourselves to know. With making decisions, we get paralysed or stuck in making a big decision because we're actually trying to jump ahead and predict how it's going to go.
Yes.
And we can't do that. So that's where we can experience the anxiety, because none of us have control over the future. Even if we think we're really sure about something, we never have full certainty over the future. And so it's letting go of that, absolutely. And I will often say to people, there's actually no such thing as making a wrong decision, because we make a decision right now based on what's available to us right now.
Yeah.
And then we take a step, or we take a few steps, and we walk down the pathway of that decision. And we might get down the pathway and then actually go, you know what, I now have new information, new experience, as I said, information available to me through that experience that now tells me I might need to change direction. But that doesn't make back here the wrong decision, because back here it was still based. It's like comparing apples and oranges. It was based on what was available to me back then. So again, if we can understand that and let go of the needing to know and be more patient and free with, let's just see how it goes.
Yeah.
And take some steps and allow the flexibility, and know there is flexibility and option to change direction as we need. Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Society can lead to a lot of guilt about when we put in all these expectations that we think people think how we should be behaving and acting. Have you got any advice around how to alleviate some of that guilt?
Yeah, well, it does come back to the shoulds and the expectations again, doesn't it? So a lot of this is about self-trust and knowing that everybody is going to be different in terms of how they go about things, in terms of, how they parent and how they feed and how they, allow their baby to sleep and how they manage care and all of those things. So I think if we're feeling overwhelmed by that and starting to question ourselves with that because we're comparing ourselves or whatever we're doing, it's maybe just starting to quieten down and maybe remove or separate ourselves from some of that feedback we're getting. So whether it be being on social media a little bit less and not, as I said, looking at too much of what other people are doing. I think there's a difference between informing ourselves and then actually relying on other and not therefore trusting our own intuition and way.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of a fine line of I want to be planned, I want to be informed, I want to see what's happening and other things I can be doing, but at the same time not to be doing that in sacrifice of our own intuition. And that can be hard. What is that? And there's so much that's in that, but I think, as I said, that really does come back to our own values. So one of the best things we can do there is really check in with that. Well, who's the parent I want to be? Yeah.
Because I think, certainly the whole thing around comparison is such a huge thing, especially when, you have parents groups or you have, parents at the park and you're looking at them, how well put together they are or not. You're looking at yourself, you're looking at your child, you're looking at your child's behaviour, you're comparing everything in that moment. They've got snacks, oh, you forgot the snacks, all those sorts of things. And it can be really easy to fall into a trap of, being hard on ourselves rather than, looking at it differently. And, the same with, things like if we do take time out, like the guilt around that. Yeah. Are there any sort of other tips and tricks that parents can try and put into play when they're in those sort of situations?
Yeah, and what you said there, gosh, it's just everywhere, isn't it? So I think, again, part of it's just normalising that there's always going to be someone to compare to.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something that we sort of feel like we're not doing enough in comparison or we should be doing differently in comparison. Yeah. And so just normalising that. We know with even, well, certainly with like seeing on social media, but even the parent that, as you say, is all well put together, we still don't actually know.
That's right.
And not only do we still not actually know, but if we're actually prioritising some of those things over the sake of, again, at heart, the parent we want to be. And what do I mean by that? Because it's very easy to go, okay, well, I want to be a parent that always makes sure I've got snacks for my kids. But is that a value or an outcome?
Yeah.
Because the value, why do we always want to be that parent? Okay, maybe it's because I want to be a nurturing parent, okay? I want to be, someone that is providing for my child, okay? Always having snacks for my child is not the only one way or necessarily even the way to provide and be nurturing to my child. So values are about how we show up, not what we do. And they're how we show up in whatever it is we're doing. So maybe I have forgotten the snacks. But what's more important in that moment is how I'm showing up with that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be realising I've forgotten the snacks and then berating myself, and therefore I'm, disconnected and I'm irritable and I'm frustrated. That's not the mother I want to be. That's actually not what my child really needs in that moment. And so if we can let go of the perfectionism and making sure we've got it all together and go, actually what really matters at heart is me showing up with that.
Yeah.
And therefore we don't have to get it all right.
Yeah.
In terms of the what, anyway.
So finally, Carrie, what are your top tips to alleviate parenting guilt?
I think, as I said, the reframe is probably the most important one. Noticing that human instinct of that first reaction to that feeling of, I'm doing something wrong, and just reminding ourselves, actually, this is what I care about, and that I'm a human being, and there is actually no perfect, there's no balance, there's no right way. And so if we can actually change our relationship to that internally, that's huge. And I think also just knowing that this is an evolving thing. And so, again, not putting pressure on ourselves to have this expectation of what it should look like, because what it needs to look like for our own self is constantly changing and evolving. So there's no right way in that, and there's certainly only what the best we can do for now in whatever is happening, which we don't necessarily have full control over. We don't necessarily have full control over of when we've got to go back to work, if we've got to go back to work, where we might, be putting our child in care or whatever it might be. There's so many factors that we don't have full control over. So if we can actually let go of that and again come back to what really matters here is how I show up in that.
Carrie, that is so helpful. Thank you very much for being with us today and sharing that nurturing, positive advice that is just going to be helping so many parents.
A huge thanks to Mistela for sponsoring this episode. Mistela empowers parents throughout their parenting journey with education and honest conversations from pregnancy and beyond. Mistela has plenty of parenting articles and resources on their website. Visit mistela.com.au.
You've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. Never forget, parents, you've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyou'vegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.
The information provided in this podcast is general in nature and is intended to support, not replace, a discussion with your doctor or healthcare professional. Parents You've Got This take no responsibility for any medical decisions made by individuals based on the information provided in this podcast.